This Saturday it'll be two 1-2 teams going up to battle in San Jose, California, in Mountain West play Utah State versus San Jose State. But it seems like two teams that are headed in different directions. Thanks for listening to the Aggie Up podcast. This is Isaac Draxler. I'll be your host, and we've got a special guest on tonight with us, Jackson Moore from Inside the Spartans. Is that how it's supposed to be, Jackson? Inside
Oh
the
yeah,
Spartans, right?
correct. Yes.
All right, perfect. So let's jump right into this matchup. Both teams are 1-2. Tell us a little bit about what your outlook is or what your thoughts are so far about this Spartans team after, I guess, a couple tough losses, kind of big losses, and one win against an FCS team, which sounds familiar. That's kind of what Utah State did as well. So give us your impressions, though. What does your eye tell you that this team is going to be?
Right. Well, San Jose State, they actually were able to get in one of those week zero games, so they're 1-3. That game was pretty much
Oh,
just
that's right.
another. Yeah, it was pretty much just another
South
version of
Florida,
those
right?
other two losses. Yeah. So there wasn't much more that I don't think the Spartans took away from that game, other than playing another overmatched team, just as they had in the other two games, and Utah State has in their two games. So it's kind of tough to find that measuring stick for either team right now. So in that case, I think it's kind of even going into this game. I know the betting line's been pretty even throughout the week. But as far as San Jose State goes, it's really been tough, especially to measure where they are at against some of the Power Five schools, because they are running an offense that is very based on up tempo and getting in as many plays as possible and trying to take advantage of one-on-one matchups. And there's just not many of those you're going to win against Power Five programs, especially with the first-year coach. And then defensively, they've been overmatched, so it's been kind of a perfect storm. It's a scheme that may fare a lot better in conference play, but it's kind of a wait and see until Saturday to see if it works or not.
Okay. Um, so tell us about what you're expecting from the QB position this week. I guess I guess what quarterback are they planning on? Are you expecting to see this Saturday?
Oh, it sounds like Josh Love is going to be the guy. That I don't know if it's for certain, but covering the first two games, Josh Love started both of those games, and he was replaced in both of those first two games by Montel Aaron, and that included a game that they won against Cal Poly, that FCS game. The offense was just not doing anything in the first half, and they made that switch. But Montel Aaron went down against after a fairly unproductive game against Texas. He went down with an injury at Utah, so he's not going to be available. They went to the third quarterback instead of Love in that game against Utah, and he threw two interceptions. So they're kind of back to square one with Josh Love. He was a guy that was a three-star recruit by Scout, but never got the offer. He joined as a preferred walk-on and started a game last year when the starter went down, Kenny Potter, and Love has since been put on scholarship. So he's going to get a second chance here and possibly prove why he won that starting job in the first place during camp.
What type of quarterback is he? Is he more of a dual threat kind of guy, or is he a pocket passer?
Yeah, I'd say he's more of a pocket passer. He's not slow or unathletic by any means, but not a guy that's necessarily going to beat you with the legs. Um, he, I would describe his arm as inconsistent. He had a few throws, especially in the first game against Southern Florida, where San Jose State jumped out to a 16-0 lead, and he had a few really nice throws, but before you knew it, he was throwing it to the other team in the second and third quarters and just had a few that weren't quite on target. He's only a redshirt sophomore and has some developing to do, but um, it's going to be ups and downs regardless of the opponent, I would say.
Yeah, and I've watched some of that very first game, so I don't know how I forgot that they had played four games, but yeah, I watched kind of the first part of that game, their very first game in week zero, and then I watched most of the Utah game, and and I guess I think they looked better than I expected them to look with a brand new coach, and like you say, they kind of jumped out to a lead against South Florida, which is a good team, and they played well at times against Utah, which is a good defense, obviously. Um, what I guess the kind of the debate this week among Aggie fans and media has seemed to be, well, these are kind of similar teams. They've got one win, they've got a couple losses to Power Five teams. What they seem like kind of similar teams. Um, I would I would say they may be similar teams in some ways, but they definitely have a lot of differences. So maybe some different challenges, different strengths, I guess. But what would be tell us maybe some of the strengths you see with San Jose this year.
Well, the big strength for San Jose State for the past couple seasons, and I would say it's the biggest strength so far still, even though the defense gave up a whole ton of points in those three Power Five games. I would say it's the secondary. Definitely Andre Chauchere, senior cornerback, is their best player. Was a potential NFL type guy. They've been able to put players in to the next level in the secondary a few times over the past couple of years, and they had Coach Dante Williams as their cornerbacks coach for a few years, who was their ace recruiter that really helped the program try to get Mountain West level type players when they made that transition. And there's still a few of those guys in that secondary. You've got a transfer from Washington that's in that mix as well. Um, just a lot of depth and talent there. Uh, However, the run game has kind of been the Achilles heel of that same defense over the past couple of years, kind of neutralizing what that secondary can do. And it's been no different this year either. That defensive front, they've switched to a 3-4 defense, but it's been a struggle. They just don't quite have the talent or the depth on the D line.
Okay. So that's kind of a weakness then, the D line this year. Maybe bring in some new recruits and build that for the future.
Yeah, if you look at the starting group, it's three juniors, and the nose tackle has gone through some injury issues.
Hmm.
After that, I mean, it's really primarily a group of freshmen and sophomores, some walk-ons. There was a preferred walk-on 255-pounder that was the reserve nose tackle for one game, and so they're struggling with the depth there, and it's not going to get any easier throughout the season either. But uh, it's just if they're playing a team that can run the ball pretty well, it's not going to probably fare well. If they're going up against the pass, they may be able to make some swing plays in the secondary.
Right. Yeah, and you sent me a few questions, and I filled out your your questions and everything, and really one of the keys to the Aggies offense is their running game, especially if Kent Myers can't play and he's not running the ball. Um, it really comes down to El Toro Allen. Um, it could be the X factor, and he's a brand new junior college transfer, so. He's looked pretty good in the past couple games, but he hasn't had to carry a load or hasn't necessarily got the majority of the carries or anything. Along with Lamont Hunt, he's kind of the running back by committee right now. So it'll be interesting to see if the Aggies can take advantage of that. It sounds like that may be the opportunity as much or more um, than passing the ball. And as we all know, if you establish the running game, that opens up the passing game, that opens up the offense, the play calling, all that kind of stuff. And I think that was basically that. That would be kind of an opportunity. So I guess we'll see on Saturday. Tell me a little bit more because I think it's interesting to look at, especially where Utah State was in the WAC, San Jose was in the WAC. They both had really good seasons in 2012, joined the Mountain West, and they joined the Mountain West at the same time, and really from there, San Jose State's maybe struggled a little bit more than the Aggies, or how would you kind of characterize the move to the Mountain West?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. Because I know, as well as San Jose State, I cover the Fresno State side, and
Hmm.
the two fan bases will tend to go at it. And
Yeah.
the Spartans, I mean, they really under Coach Mike McIntyre, they had a couple really good seasons in that short span where the Bulldogs were and Spartans were not in the same conference, and San Jose State and Utah State were really rising. Both had really good seasons there for a few years. Um, and after that, I feel like San Jose State was able to, step up in recruiting. They did very well with Coach Dante Williams, who I mentioned earlier, leading that effort, and especially in the skills positions, they were always pretty loaded there. Maybe not so much with the offensive and defensive lines, but for whatever reason, the coaching staff that replaced Mike McIntyre was never really able to uh, cash in on the type of recruits they were getting. I mean, they even had David Fales their first year, who has been able to stick around in the NFL for a while. And I mean, they put up 62 points against that Derek Carr Fresno State team that faced Utah State the following week in the Mountain West Championship game. So
Right.
there's been flashes there where you think that they have enough talent and everything to get the job done. But between Coach Carragher as the head coach, and then you had two senior or veteran coordinators with Al Borges and Greg Robinson on the defensive side, names that, I mean, pretty well known, especially for Mountain West coordinators. There was tons of experience and everything that you would want on the coaching staff, but they just never seemed to get the players to show the fire that they needed. And that was especially, I mean, just the lackluster games over the last 2 years, especially led to the buyout of Coach Carragher. And with this new coaching staff, they went real young, real energetic, and you kind of wonder if maybe they'd be able to tap in with these types of recruits they've been getting that haven't been performing as well to maybe light a fire under them. But it's just been too big of a mismatch in the first few weeks, and we'll see if maybe conference play changes things, or if maybe it's even a bigger rebuilding project than we realized.
Right. What are some of the challenges, I guess? Is it, I guess, just overall depth and talent maybe on the lines especially, and that kind of thing, or what are some of the challenges with San Jose?
Yeah, the Lions especially just they haven't had an answer for the run game, especially on defense. When it comes to offense, they have a pretty veteran group of linemen, but they're the same ones that gave up the most sacks in the conference last year. Um, that just hasn't been too successful, whether it's the scheme or what was the reason for that. I think the biggest thing with this team is probably depth at the D line and at the quarterback position. Last year they had Kenny Potter, who was not a next level type quarterback, but was definitely uh, good enough in the Mountain West to make the team competitive and led him to a bowl game in his first season as a starter. But overall, I think there's just too many holes, and especially critical positions like D line. They're not may not be able to get pressure that they need, and especially a quarterback if they struggle there. Those are going to be just two tough ones to overcome.
What about the new coaching staff? It seems like they are playing hard. They are motivated. Doesn't seem like they're going to give up. So it almost reminds me of like a game that the Aggies should have won last year against like a Nevada or against a New Mexico, where they're not outmanned, but it'll be interesting to see how they can perform either with a lead or from behind, or if they're going to play four quarters, and that kind of thing. Uh, I guess, is that kind of a fair statement? Do you see the San Jose just kind of sticking in there and playing hard four quarters?
Yeah, that's the hope. Just because this coaching staff is again so young, and just the big emphasis has been the energy and everything in practice. I mean, they're going full speed with the up-tempo offense and trying to change the culture there. And just those three losses they took on were just tough matchups, and it took kind of the air out of the sails as far as the energy goes. And I think that's the big question. If they can get the team to kind of regroup and get into conference play, if they can play with that spark, I think there's enough there where they're not any less so talented than a lot of the other Mountain West teams. But if they can't find that fire and they have those holes that are going to cost them, it's going to be too much between the two things. But I mean, if they come out the same way they did against USF to start the season, that should be enough to buy them a few wins.
So as you mentioned, you've covered the Mountain West for a while. You've covered a few different teams and everything. What's what's the kind of outsiders' opinion on Matt Wells and on this program and kind of where they're headed, what they've been doing the last couple years?
Yeah, it's been, I would say, a head scratcher. I know a lot of people. I mean, at least for me personally, I covered that Mountain West Championship game, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really neat. Something different was that they gave us the Fresno State coaching staff and players, and then the Utah State coaching staff and players in the same room. So, usually you get split up and you don't get to hear both sides. But for that one, we were able to, and it just felt like Tim DeRuyter and Matt Wells were just, destined to be Power Five coaches within the next year or two, and teams were going to have to do a whole lot to keep them around. And Fresno State, at least I know in their case, they did a lot to keep Coach DeRuyter around, and that went downhill real fast. And so I see a lot of parallels just from where the Fresno State and Utah State have gone since that game. Even with San Jose State, I know last year it felt like they were kind of in a situation where Coach Carragher was not so really solidified as the guy to move the program forward, but he still had another year on his contract, which set up for an awkward situation. So I think the San Jose State fans in particular maybe see a lot of the same things there if Utah State has another poor season where they go through kind of the same process the Spartans did and the Bulldogs did, frankly, last year too.
Yeah, I think that's a good example, I guess. And hopefully, I guess maybe I should say that's hopefully not an example of what is to come as far as
Yeah,
Fresno
because
State or
both
San
Fresno's,
Jose.
yeah, but I mean, both of those programs had opportunities to bounce
Yeah.
back and keep those coaching staffs, and even in Fresno State's case, they basically overhauled the assistant staff to say, "Hey,
Hmm.
this is your year to bounce back, and then we'll get back into it after the season." But it just went so far downhill; they had to make a change and find the dollars to make it happen.
Yeah. And and really, I mean, moving on to kind of I guess the Utah State side of the analysis, that's it's been 11 straight losses on the road. So it's actually been since the Aggies went to Fresno State. I'm sure you remember that game when Utah State went to Fresno State, got a win on the road, came home, beat Boise State, and since then they haven't won on the road. They have not won a single game. So I don't know if you have any idea of how that is even possible, but it kind of just I think it just makes all of us think. And going into Saturday, we'll believe it when we see it. We'll hope it changes, but we've got 11 examples, and I've gone on the road to places like Nevada and Colorado State and Air Force and different losses where Utah State had all the chances in the world to win the game and they just didn't make it happen. So um, I don't know if you have thoughts on that or how that's possible. And more than anything, I think in the way I answered your question as far as are Utah State fans missing Gary Anderson, I would say it's hard to argue that really everything is kind of taking a step back, right? So whether it's the players, whether physical, highly skilled, whatever the case may be, recruiting, no matter how you look at that, is kind of taking a step back. They're still putting a few players in the NFL, and they still have some talent, but they've taken a step back a little bit, and you know, losing every game on the road last year in Mountain West play, that's definitely a step back from where they were playing. You know, like I mentioned, that the first couple years that Matt Wells was the head coach, they would go on the road and they'd pull out wins at Wyoming, and they'd pull out wins at Fresno State and at different places that they played. So it's kind of it's I guess it's hard to argue that that's kind of all taking a step back. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've seen some bad streaks covering Fresno and San Jose in
Yeah,
particular the last couple of years. I want to say Fresno State's at uh, 24 out of 26 losses against FBS programs in their last games. I know they
yeah,
ended 2014 with a pair of losses, and have only won two FBS games since then. So it's an ungodly stat, whatever it breaks down to. San Jose State, I know they haven't been a whole lot better. I think their only win on the road last year themselves was at Fresno State. So when you look at least those trends, I mean, you got to draw the line somewhere. And I would say in Matt Wells' case at Utah State, it's kind of make or break. It sounded like that was the case from what you had replied to me as well. If they get a win at San Jose State, then that kind of starts turning it maybe in the other direction with how they perform this weekend.
yeah. Absolutely, a win at San Jose State and a win against BYU at home really puts them where they should be, and that would be a 3-2 record. That would be a couple Mountain West, well, one Mountain West win, but going into a couple home games, the schedule is really set up pretty favorably. But a loss at San Jose State is, or even just a poor showing. I mean, you never know how well San Jose State will play either. So the poor showing at San Jose State, whether it's a win or loss, and then a loss to BYU would be pretty bad. It seems like. Let me ask you about this. Maybe would be my last San Jose question. We here in Utah, we've been hearing a lot about San Jose. They played Utah, now they're playing Utah State, and they're gonna play BYU. So it's almost like they're one of the in-state teams. It seems like we've been hearing a lot about them. So I guess it'll be interesting to see maybe your opinions on Utah and Utah State. Going forward, I don't think anybody has illusions that the programs are in similar situations, but maybe the better comparison will be BYU and Utah State, even though they play next week and they'll be able to prove it on the field. But I guess that's one interesting thing about San Jose State, right?
Yeah, and they've played. I think they've played Utah and BYU even more than the Aggies the past couple of years because of that inter-division schedule. This was their back-to-back trip with Utah. The Utes came to San Jose last year and was a bit closer in San Jose, understandably, than it was last week. BYU has come to Spartan Stadium a few times in the last couple of years, and they've actually been pretty close games, but we'll see if this one lives up to that as well. Um, I know as far as San Jose State goes, I talked a lot about the kind of the weaknesses, and understandably so. After the past couple of weeks, they've been outscored so much. It's hard to be too optimistic, but going into conference play, there's a few pieces, guys like sophomore receiver Bailey Gaither that's got 200-yard games, and tight end Josh Oliver, who's just one of the most impressive athletes I've seen, especially at the Mountain West level. linebacker Frank Ginda Jr. that's been totally solid for the team. A few highlight players like those that will be at least ones to watch if San Jose State is to bounce back this weekend.
Yeah, we'll definitely be watching, and I think there, like you say, there is some talent on on the San Jose State side. So I don't think by any means it's especially on the road. All you have to do is say Utah State's traveling on the road, and it seems like it turns into a tough game. But especially when you throw in that San Jose State has a new coaching staff, I think they'll be motivated. I think they'll play hard. So any game predictions or parting thoughts from you, Jackson?
Yeah, it's been tough because for covering a few Mountain West teams, looking at predicting their Power Five games, it's been not too difficult to kind of get around that final
Mm,
score number, figuring it'll be pretty lopsided. And I mean, most of the Mountain West teams, you take out San Diego State, of course, and like a Boise State, just about everyone has traveled or played big teams and not fared very well, and all kind of go in a pretty similar standing. So I think it's going to be really hard to figure out where everyone's at the first couple of weeks. I know for Fresno State, they host Nevada next week for both of their conference openers, and no one quite knows what to think about that one. And it's kind of the same one here. I just don't know. I think it could really go either way. I'm just interested to kind of get a feel of where the two teams are at, and I think it'll be a good measuring stick to see where the two of them are at against each other.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, both teams are saying, you know what, we had some tough games. We played some good competition, and we had something. We had some times and some good moments, and we had some bad moments, but we're 0-0 in the Mountain West, where we haven't lost in the Mountain West yet. So let's go out and get a win. I don't think San Jose State's going to roll over, and I don't think Utah State, um, by any means, is good enough to just sleepwalk their way through this game. So we'll all be watching. We'll all be uh, I guess uh, you know analyzing it and moving forward. I think we'll talk a lot about it. Especially going into the BYU game, which is a huge in-state rivalry. And really, I mean, I guess I could name this podcast episode or this one this week is, really the 1-2 record isn't what's important. I think or what isn't what worries me or what gets me excited about this year. And I think more Aggie fans are probably worried than excited about the rest of the season. But the 1-2 record or 1-3 record in San Jose State's case isn't doesn't tell everything because going into Mountain West play, a lot of Mountain West teams are going to be 1-2, or a lot of Mountain West teams are going to lose to the Wisconsins and Utahs and Texas and South Floridas and those types of teams. Um, but I think maybe and really for both sides, um, we can definitely look at some positives and some negatives and some question marks, and especially with injuries. Jordan Love is a guy that looks like will probably get the start. Um, Maybe, I mean, we've seen Kent Myers, get head injuries before, and that kind of and get knocked out of games and take big hits and different things, and that's probably one of the reasons why Aggie fans are worried about this game because um, using that San Jose State or that San Diego State game as an example. After the Boise State win, um, once he got hit, he was never really the same quarterback. Made some bad choices and different things. So it'll be interesting to see that the staff is super tight-lipped, whether it'll be Jordan Love or whether it'll be Kent Myers. on Saturday, and I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. Did you cover Jordan Love when he was in high school, and do you have any explanation why Fresno and San Jose kind of passed on him?
Yeah, I didn't ever cover him in game, but I am definitely familiar with him.
Yeah.
Especially, it's been odd here at Fresno State, especially the past coaching staff under Coach DeRuiter really got away from Central Valley recruiting, which was always so big for Fresno State, and really alienated, especially the Bakersfield area. I don't recall anyone from Bakersfield where the Bulldogs had, the Carr family and
Hmm.
Ryan Matthews. I mean, I don't think they recruited just about anyone from Bakersfield throughout that whole time. And as soon as Coach Jeff Tedford came in, they grabbed a couple players out of there for this past class. And as far as San Jose State goes, I know they have brought in quite a few different quarterbacks that they must have just preferred over Love. They had Josh Love. Their own Love came in a couple of years ago, and they had Montel Aaron, who was a three-star that they really liked, and they had a recruit from Hanford, Ryan Johnson, and a quarterback from San Diego, Terrell Carter, in this past class. So they've just been kind of full at quarterbacks without having to scramble too much.
Yeah, it seems like there has been some offering the same guys, especially quarterbacks. I think they didn't end up offering uh, was it Carter, Terrell Carter,
Mhm.
if I remember right. But but he's a guy that they definitely looked at, and so so there's some crossover there that they kind of both recruited or at least considered and looked at, and I think that kind of the same areas, but I mean that's uh, almost unfathomable, I guess, or whatever word you want to call it, that that DeRuiter wouldn't recruit the Central Valley. That makes no sense. Well, it was. I mean, did anybody ever ask him like how is that even where did that even come from? Like why he just thought Texas athletes were better, so he was gonna recruit Texas and Southern California instead or something? Like I don't even understand that.
Yeah, I would say there was a Texas bias, and a lot of the staff came with him from Texas A&M. And even though DeRuiter is a native of Southern California, he had a lot more connections, I think, with high school coaches and things there. And it was just kind of concerning, even when it was happening, because it wasn't like they were going up against a TCU or even an SMU for recruits. It was usually Texas State, and then down the road to teams like Lamar showed up on a lot of the same offer sheets. And I mean, I think Fresno State fans wouldn't mind if the team was winning, but when the coaching staff is uh, recruiting other players in Texas more so than the Central Valley and losing, that's a tough one to swallow. And I mean, even at the Mountain West Media Days, I think 5 or 6 players from the 2 representatives at each school were from the Fresno Bakersfield area, but none of them were wearing Bulldog uniforms. One of them is San Jose State's Andre Chachere is from Fresno, right in town, a few miles away from the stadium.
Wow.
And it seemed like just about every week last year the Bulldogs were getting hit by some 1 or 2 Central Valley players that they passed on. So we'll see if that maybe changes things in the conference, because Coach Tedford has come in and really tried to plant his flag and make sure the Utah States and San Jose States and Nevadas don't come in and take any more of those players going forward.
Yeah, like I say, that's amazing. That reminds me though, I definitely want to touch on one of the surprises for the Aggies this year is cornerback Jamarcus Ingram, and he's one of those Texas guys that did fall through the cracks. Like he didn't get recruited, he didn't get offers. He was a 6 foot, pretty good wide receiver, 6'1", 6'1", wide receiver in high school with no offers. He came to Utah State, redshirted last year. They switched him to cornerback, and really all through fall camp, he was locking down that number one cornerback position opposite Jalen Davis, which is, Jalen Davis is an all Mountain West type cornerback, and the guy has so far been really good. So it'll be interesting. I think one of my keys to the game is who's guarding Gaither and who's on, if they can stop both the tight end and Gaither with somebody that can cover. That'll be a huge key, along with the Aggies getting pressure and so forth and so on. But if Gaither gets on somebody that's not Ingram or not Davis, he could catch some balls. He could have a pretty good game. So, um, the defensive backfield for the Aggies is a strength, but Gaither's good enough to no doubt beat the other guys that aren't Ingram or Davis, and maybe even make some things happen against those guys if obviously if San Jose starts moving the ball, the offensive line gives the quarterback time and so forth. So that'll definitely be a huge key for the Aggies is making sure they get him covered. Tight ends have killed the Aggies in the past. The play action and some of that has really killed the Aggies. Obviously, Wisconsin is so good at that. They were able to run the ball and just pick the Aggies apart. Really, I think these go fast, go hard, up tempo offenses, spread offenses, um, more than tiring out the defense, maybe, is I feel like sometimes the defense tries to make the big play, and I think we saw that a few times against Wake Forest. I kind of went back and watched some of those plays that just killed the Aggies, and what I saw more than being tired or bad play call or guys that aren't good enough or whatever. Um, I think I saw kind of just guessing and trying to make big plays instead of just doing their job, right? Just doing their assignment. So I don't know if you have an opinion on the yeah the defense. I guess that what happens to the defense when it's such an up tempo kind of fast offense, but that's kind of my theory or what I've seen from the Aggies so far.
Hmm. Yeah, I hate to keep harping with Fresno State, but they just came from that type of scheme, and um, when they had Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, it seemed unstoppable, and it's just like the more plays they ran, the more chances there was that they were going to convert on some of those plays and scores, and there was a few different ways they could attack, and defenses kind of had to pick their poison, and as that talent depleted and they were pretty shallow at a lot of the positions, it's just it wasn't effective, and it just felt like it was more. It was getting the ball out of their hands faster and giving the opponent's offenses more chances to inflate the scoreboard, even if it was out of hand, or give them more opportunities to score. And that's just one thing that kind of worries me with San Jose State is that I don't know if I see the type of weapons that they have at quarterback and at the skills positions to make the offense move consistently. But it'll change when we see the team against a peer group team like Utah State if maybe they can convert on more of those matchups with guys like Bailey Gaither and if Love can put the ball on the money and not have to face some of the Power 5 secondaries he's had to go up against the past
Right.
couple of weeks.
Yeah, and then so 40 minutes into this podcast, I'll definitely mention go to ustateaggies.com, even go to Inside the Spartans, and check out those articles, those message boards, kind of get a feel for what Spartan fans are thinking right now. Um, definitely a good place to check out that information, get ready for the game, whether it's on Friday or Saturday. Once you've listened to this podcast, kind of move on to some of those features. Jackson does a great job on his website, on that website, kind of previewing the game and different things. So definitely check that out. Go to ustateaggies.com. Check out the premium content as well. As always, definitely have to plug the premium membership. Check that out. We've got some promotions and some awesome recruiting content that you're going to get. That one of the biggest benefits or biggest reasons people sign up for the premium membership is to get all the recruiting, all the recruiting news, the latest information from all the best recruiting writers and analysts. So definitely check that out. Thanks for listening to the Aggie Up podcast. I think that is everything that I wanted to cover, but definitely check out Scout and the Utah State site and the San Jose site for more information. Thanks for listening, Jackson. Thanks for jumping on. Um, I think it'll be a fun game to watch. So we'll all be waiting to see. One of the questions we've got time for it, I suppose. Um, we'll just answer it. It says, "Why start Myers? He has gotten worse every year. He doesn't help us. It's time to move on." That's from JT Aggie. So not a lot of love for Myers right now. I think a lot of people know what they're getting with Kent Myers. And if they went with Love or if they went with Columby, one of the young guys, it would be kind of interesting. It would kind of be fun to see what you've got and give them experience and grow for the future. Um, if Kent Myers can play, I would say there's a 100% chance he's gonna play. I don't see Matt Wells saying, "Oh yeah, he's okay to play." But I'm going to go with the young guy. I think there's a very, 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 very small chance that that's actually going to happen. So if that's the case, I guess you could hope that the concussion protocol or the injuries are too bad for Myers to start and too bad for Myers to play. That's probably your best bet, kind of along the lines of Chucky Keaton getting benched when he got injured again, for the third time or whatever, fourth time or whatever. That's when he really got benched. Is when it was too much. So, what can we expect to see in the trenches is another question. We've got 2 minutes left. The sounds like I think the D line is probably the weakness of both teams, and so if the offensive line for San Jose um, can run block and pass block and can dominate the line of scrimmage more than the Aggie offensive line. I think that obviously would give the you know give the edge to San Jose. I think Utah State can put out a pretty decent defensive line with some of their younger guys, some of their D tackles and nose guards. Have played pretty well at times. Defensive ends have played off and on okay. So the Aggies should have I guess they should be able to take advantage of that, both on their offensive line and their defensive line. But I don't know about you, Jackson. We've got a minute left, but I kind of see being on the road and everything is kind of just a crapshoot and a question mark. I don't know which Utah State team is going to show up, so we have to wait and see on Saturday. So we'll let you go. We'll end this podcast. We thank everyone for listening. Have a great night, and remember to tune in to Aggie Up Podcast. See ya.